today? I hope you are all doing great. Before we start our lesson, I want you to prepare yourself and the needed materials for your study. Get your module, your pen, and your paper, and try to find a nice and comfortable place inside your home for you to focus more on our lesson. This module will tackle the interactions between living things and non-living things in estuaries and intertidal zones. As we go along the way, we will be guided by the 3 guiding questions, which are: what are estuaries and intertidal zones? What are the different habitats and factors that can be found in estuaries and intertidal zones? Describe the different interactions that take place in estuaries and intertidal zones. As we go along the way, we will be answering these 3 guiding questions and learn science. Are you ready now? If yes, then come and let's get started. Life on Earth is a product of different interactions in a region or geographic area where both factors, biotic and abiotic, work together. This area is called ecosystem. An ecosystem is a community of living organisms in conjunction with the non-living components of their environment, interacting as a system. These biotic and abiotic components are linked together through cycles and energy flows. Now let's go over with the first guiding question. What are estuaries and intertidal zones? Look at these 2 images. What can you notice about these pictures? Yes, these are bodies of water. The first picture is an example of estuaries, while the second picture is an example of intertidal zone. These are bodies of water. We have the oceans and the river. Look closer to this. What we can see here is the river. Where do you think the river water goes? Yes, it flows to the ocean. And this area is what we call the estuaries. It is where the salt water from the ocean mixes to the fresh water from the rivers or streams. While in this clip, we can see the rising and the receding tides. In this area is the intertidal zones, where land meets the sea. Now you have an idea of what estuaries and intertidal zones are. But let's dig deeper. Let's go over with their definitions. Estuaries, nurseries of the seas, serves as breeding ground of many ocean fish. It is a body of brackish water near the coast where fresh water from rivers and streams flows and mixes with the ocean's salt water. Intertidal zone. It is an area where land meets the sea between high and low tide zones. It is composed of all plants, animals, and microorganisms living in it. This includes coral reefs teeming with many corals with different kinds of fish. Both intertidal zones and estuaries provide habitats for many organisms. Habitat is a place where an organism makes its home. The Philippines, being an archipelago, is surrounded by seas and oceans. Because of this, the Philippines is rich in coastal areas, which are home to many kinds of marine animals and birds. As you observed, estuaries are home to unique plant and animal communities that have been adapted to brackish water. Brackish means salt water combined with fresh water or salty fresh water mix. Now it's time for an activity. This is activity number 1. Arrange the jumbled letters to form the word that is being described. You are given 5 seconds for each item. For the first item, it is a community of living organisms in conjunction with the non-living components of their environment interacting as a system.
What is your answer? Ecosystem? Then you are correct. Next item. These served as the breeding grounds of many ocean fish, commonly called as the nurseries of the seas. Time's up! If you answer estuaries, then you are definitely right. For number 3, salt water combined with fresh water or salty fresh water mix. The answer is brackish. Off you go for the 4th item. It is an area where land meets the sea between high and low tide zones. What is your answer? Yes, intertidal zone. And for the last item, number 5, it is a place where an organism makes its home. If your answer is habitat, amazing! You did a good job!
It seems that you are keeping up. So let's move on to our next guiding question. What are the different habitats and factors that can be found in estuaries and intertidal zones?
Both intertidal zones and estuaries provide habitats for many organisms. These habitats have a lot of abiotic factors that affect the biotic factors or living organisms in them. What are abiotic factors? Refer to the non-living components of an ecosystem. These factors affect the growth, survival, and reproduction of living organisms and their functions in the ecosystem. What are biotic factors? These are living organisms that can affect an ecosystem. This set of organisms can be the producer. It can manufacture their own food. Consumer, organisms that get energy by feeding on plants and other organisms. Or decomposers, organisms that feed on dead animals and wastes. These are some abiotic factors that can be found especially in estuaries and intertidal zones. Water in the form of waves, salinity, temperature, amount of sunlight, and types of soil. Let's go over these abiotic factors one by one. First, we have the waves. The waves from the sea may affect the type of organisms living in the estuary. Some organisms like mussels and seaweeds attached be carried by the waves. Next is the salinity of water. The salinity of the water refers to the amount of salt present in the water. The salinity of estuaries is lower than the sea and ocean. Some organisms prefer to breed in places with low salinity. Next abiotic factor is the temperature. Temperature of the water must not be too hot nor too cold for the young organisms to live. The factor is also affected by the tides and the presence of mangroves in the area. Next is the amount of sunlight. The amount of sunlight is crucial to photosynthetic organisms like phytoplankton, seaweed, and seagrass. These organisms need sunlight to create their own food and produce oxygen for the living things. If the amount of sunlight in an estuary is low, then there will be less of these organisms that support other organisms in an estuarine or intertidal ecosystem. Lastly is the types of soil. Soil differ depending on the strength of waves and kinds of rocks present in the area. Some areas are full of rocks, sand, pebble, or clay. Since nutrients are found in soil, these types of soil have an effect on the kind of living things that live in this ecosystem. Moving on with the biotic factors. The biotic factors or living organisms are composed of all plants, animals, and microorganisms living in it. Under these biotic factors are the different habitats. These are coral reefs, salt marshes, mudflats, rocky shores, and mangrove forests. Again, let's dig deeper to each habitat. Coral reefs are areas which are teeming with many corals. Coral reef formation are seen in this area due to a large number of corals living here. It served as sanctuary for young fish, corals, jellyfish, sea anemones, sea stars, and the like. Mudflats. Mudflats are areas which has a large amount of mud deposited on it. The mud usually comes from the sea and the river. Animals living in mudflats are crabs, migratory birds, sand dollars, mussels, clams, mollusks, barnacles, and shellfish. Salt marsh areas. Salt marsh areas are filled with seawater during high tide and becomes drained when it's low tide. The area is marshy because of the decomposing plant matter in the area. Animals living in salt marsh are fish, clams, oysters, mussels, snails, and shrimps. Next is the rocky shore. A rocky shore is an intertidal area of sea coast while solid rock predominates. Animals living in rocky shores are barnacles, hermit crabs, sea stars, limpets, mollusks, shrimps, prawns, and crabs. Lastly, mangrove forests. Mangrove forests are areas filled with mangrove trees that have adapted to salt water. Mangroves protect the coasts against erosion caused by waves, winds, and tides. Animals live in mangrove forests are algae, barnacles, oysters, shrimps, lobsters, and crabs. These are also a breeding ground for different kinds of fish.
Now you have already answered the second guiding question, and for that, we will have another activity. Tell whether the words listed are biotic or abiotic. You are given 5 seconds to write your answers in your notebook.
First item, temperature. The answer is abiotic. Good job! Next item, animals. Is it biotic or abiotic? Great! It is biotic. For the third item, amount of sunlight. If your answer is abiotic, then you are correct. Number 4. Tell whether if it is biotic or abiotic. Types of soil. Amazing! The answer is abiotic. For the fifth item, plants. If you answer that plants are biotic, then you are absolutely right.
Did you get a perfect score? Congratulations! You are amazing! Now you are ready for our third guiding question. Describe the different interactions that take place in estuaries and intertidal zones.
Estuaries are made up of many different types of habitats where biotic and abiotic factors are present. Look at this part of the video. How the biotic or living things and abiotic or non-living things interact. Do they need each other to survive? Yes, of course. Living things cannot sustain life without non-living things. They need to interact their physical environment and other organisms. They require energy to perform life activities. In this case, they need to eat food. Feeding relationship found in an intertidal zone and estuary. Food chain. It is a series of organisms in which an organism feeds on another organism and so on. It always starts with the producer. Food web. It is an interlinked food chain. It consists of two or more chains and contains more organisms compared to a single food chain. This diagram is an example of a food web. Now let's analyze the diagram. Observe the pattern how organisms interact and get energy through eating. For example, the salmon eats small fish, mollusk, and shrimps. Based on this diagram, fill in the blank of each item to complete the sentence. Number 1. Plankton may be eaten by Yes, mollusks and mussels. Number 2. Heron eats blank. Salmon and small fish. Number 3. Crab eats blank. Yes, crab eats worm and mussels. Number 4. Shrimps may be eaten by blank. Yes, salmon. Lastly, small fish may be eaten by heron, seal, and salmon.
That's it! You have successfully done with this lesson, but you still have to answer our summative evaluation for you to be able to check your understanding. Again, you have given 5 seconds to think about your answers. This is a multiple choice type of question, so choose the letter of the correct answer and write it in your notebook. Let's begin!
Number 1. It is a body of brackish water near the coast where fresh water from rivers and streams flows and mixes with the ocean's salt water. A. Estuaries. B. Ecosystem. C. Habitat. D. Intertidal zones. What is your answer? Letter A. Estuaries. Moving on for our number 2 item. It is an area where land meets the sea between high and low tide zones. A. Ecosystem. B. Estuaries. C. Habitat. D. Intertidal zones. The answer is D. Intertidal zones. Number 3. Refer to the non-living components of an ecosystem. These factors affect the growth, survival, and reproduction of living organisms and their functions in the ecosystem. A. Habitat. B. Biotic factors. C. Abiotic factors. D. Multifunctional factors. The answer is abiotic factors, letter C. Number 4. A blank is an intertidal area of sea coast while solid rock predominates. Animals living in this area are barnacles, hermit crabs, sea stars, limpets, mollusks, shrimps, prawns, and crabs. A. Mangrove forest. B. Mudflats. C. Rocky shore. D. Salt marsh. The answer is letter C. Rocky shore. For number 5, it is an interlinked food chain. It consists of 2 or more chains and contains more organisms compared to a single food chain. A. Ecosystem. B. Food chain. C. Food web. D. Habitat. The answer is letter C. Food web. For the part 2 of our summative evaluation, write check if it is true and X if it is false. Number 6. In a food chain, it always starts with the producer. Number 7. Living things cannot sustain life without non-living things. Number 8. Biotic and abiotic factors do not need each other to survive. Number 9. Estuaries are made up of many different types of habitats. Number 10. Living things need to eat food to gain energy to perform life activities. Now you can check your answers based on what you can see on the screen.
Did you get all the correct answers? Wow! You are truly great! Tap your shoulder 3 times. Top, top, top. Good job! For your additional activity, screenshot the graphic organizer that is being shown in your screen. Copy this and do it in your notebook. That's it! You have finished this module successfully. I hope you have learned a lot today. I am your science teacher, Teacher Anne, saying, science is fun, learning is fun, and smile always as you can. Stay safe and be the best. Bye!